going to disregard large portions of this, but I want to get your reaction when you first saw the basic outlines of what the Trump budget for schools proposes. What did you see, and what was your reaction?
I was quite disappointed. I believe that it's going to be very hurtful for our neediest and most challenged students, and I think that it will really diminish the services that we can provide in a number of different ways in our training for our educators.
So, I want to focus on one program in particular. That's Title II. That's the federal program that funds teacher development and class size reductions. Trump's budget would do away with that, get rid of the $2 billion program. And there are a lot of folks who think that, school districts don't always use that money wisely. But when you look at that kind of cut, what would the impact be in terms of dollars lost, and also what efforts would the loss of those Title II dollars impact?
Yeah. So our district would lose about $4.8 million in Title II funds, okay, which we use a significant portion of that for professional development. Mm-hmm. It would diminish or hurt parts of that program in a number of different ways. We've become nationally recognized as a leadership pipeline. We do some work with the Wallace Foundation along with some other school districts across the country, and have been recognized for that, for the principal pipeline, for principal supervisors. We are a district that's received some support from the Wallace Foundation to work with other districts across the country, and Title II funds are important. We spend somewhere just under 10%, 7 or 8% of those Title II funds to support leadership development in our district. It's critically important to have qualified leaders in our school buildings. Mm-hmm. But we also use that money for teacher training, for our systemic work on DataWise, and a number of other initiatives that we have to help our folks be the best professionals possible.
So you feel like you're being innovative with those dollars, and they're being used in ways that teachers themselves find helpful?
Absolutely.
Okay. So, the budget does make new investments in one particular area, and that's school choice. I just wonder how you think about new spending on school choice versus cuts to Title II and other programs that you rely on. What does that say to you about the Trump administration's priorities for education?
So I think it's pretty clear that their priorities are to diminish and make more difficult the job of public education in this country. I think it's a little bit misleading to talk about school choice as if it's some option that isn't already available in districts. We already have magnet programs, career academies. We already have opportunities within our school district for some choice for parents. Mm-hmm. But the logistics are quite important, and that is, like in a large district like ours that doesn't have a real significant investment in transportation, like many of the large urban districts have. Mm-hmm. As a large suburban district, you can't get from one end of our county to another in a reasonable amount of time. And so the parents who are going to transport their kids to charters, for example, many of them do not provide transportation. So parents either have to get together and pay for that on their own, or they have to be able to transport their children themselves. And for parents who are barely making it and have transportation issues and getting to the work issues, their kids don't end up in those programs because they can't afford to put them there.
So you're focusing on the logistics. There's a new school choice program in the Trump budget, as you've seen, which mm-hmm. is essentially $1 billion for public school choice within districts. And if a parent were to come to you and say, hey, I hear there's this new program and I'd like to send my child to a school of his or her choice, my choice, that's not their local community school, and I want to exercise that right, I think you should apply for it. What other issues would you cite aside from transportation? Are there other sort of things that the parent may not be considering, even if they're interested in it?
Well, I think besides transportation, I think that when I look at having been a high school principal in a couple of districts in this state, mm-hmm. I would say that we have schools that are out there that are not accredited, and so when they want to transfer into an accredited, in our case, Middle States accredited school districts like we have here, There are issues with those credits transferring and those kind of things. Certainly in terms of whether districts or whether the schools that we're talking about have certified teachers or not, I think certified teachers with degrees in in education is very important. I think you should look at all of those kinds of things. I think you should look at the course offerings, including the rigorous course offerings. We have many students in international baccalaureate programs, for example, and advanced placement programs in this state. And I think that it is they are programs that are not always available in those other kinds of choices.
So we're talking about the Trump education budget with Kevin Maxwell. He's the CEO of Prince George's County Schools in Maryland, the second largest district in the state. Are there any other cuts that you see in the Trump budget proposal for schools that concern you or you think would particularly impact Prince George's schools?
Well, I certainly think that the $1 billion in Title I funds should be realigned.
The choice funds, okay.
Yeah, the choice funds I believe they should be realigned to the regular the regular appropriation where you get it as a percentage based on the number of kids that you have. Those appropriations. I think that there was a compromise that was reached in a bipartisan way by Congress as they passed ESSA on this issue of portability of Title I funds and those kinds of things. And I think this, violates the bipartisan agreement that was passed as part of ESSA. I would say that not in the education budget directly, but I'm very concerned about the Medicaid reductions in the Health Care Act.
This is the House Republican health care.
This is the House Republican.
Obamacare, yeah.
Yeah, and that could cost, again, our challenged students who have health needs, but it would affect all of our students potentially. I mean, some school nurses are hired under these funds, and they treat not just our medically fragile students, but also regular students. But that means $13 million to our district. And again, depending on the size of your district, the percentages are still probably pretty similar. Whether you're a big district or a small district, the percentages are going to work out pretty much the same.
Are there any parts of the budget proposal that you like?
I find it hard to like a budget that cuts $9 billion from public education in America.
So, as I mentioned at the beginning, there's a consensus that this budget isn't going to pass, that Congress is going to act on its own and do what it wants to do with a lot of these education programs. But if you had some time with a lawmaker and you could bend to his or her ear for a few minutes, and that member of Congress said, well, I think there's some good things in there. I like the choice stuff, and maybe it's time for more efficiency at the education department. It's not a priority for the Trump administration. What would you say to that member of Congress?
I'd say to my members of Congress, and I do plan to do so, that this is a bad bill, and making it a little bit better doesn't make it a good bill. I would challenge my congressional leaders, my senators, and my congressmen to work to get a good bill that is consistent with the ESSA bipartisan bill that passed Congress not long ago. I believe this is not this bill that is proposed. This budget bill is not in concert with that ESSA, with the heart and intent of that bill. And I would encourage Congress to go back to the blueprint that they laid out with ESSA and fund public education.
So you've mentioned ESSA a few times. That's the Every Student Succeeds Act. That's the new federal education law. You've mentioned that this budget and that law are not in harmony.
Correct.
Can you talk a little bit more about why that is in funding and in other areas too?
Well, I think in I mentioned a few minutes ago the portability question. I mean, Congress reached a compromise on the portability of funds, and I think this is not consistent with that. I think that funding public education, I don't support, and I think a number of my colleagues, most of my colleagues, do not support even the competitive grants, because we think, if you're really good at writing grants, you get them, and if you're not really good, and some districts have better ability to do that than others, we think that it should be appropriated, based on, the need and the numbers of children that you have in certain categories. The professional development will certainly be hurt, and I think that Congress didn't intend for that to happen. The reduction in 21st century grants, they talk in ESSA a lot about the well-rounded school children, and for a lot of us that do work in the environmental area, and Maryland has a graduation requirement in environmental education, and some of us do a lot of work in the arts, and so those well-rounded monies are really absent, I think, in large degree in this new law, and I think that's unfortunate, because I think Congress, when they passed ESSA, were hoping to move to a more well-rounded, holistic approach
You're
to
talking
teaching
about
children.
The Title IV money
Yes,
that was
correct.
in there, and there was clearly a lot of interest in that, and the Trump budget doesn't give any money to that block grant program.
Correct.
You're saying that's a mistake.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, I think we are just about out of time. I want to thank Kevin Maxwell for being with us.
Well, thank you for having me.
Really appreciate the time, and thank you for joining us on Facebook Live.